Well, hello and welcome to another video by Financial Learning. On today's video, we're going to talk about CleanSpark Inc. and their May mid-month mining numbers. If you've been following the price of Bitcoin, you would know that for the month of May, it's actually been averaging over $100,000 per Bitcoin for the entire month of May. So we're going to take a look to see exactly how much revenue CleanSpark has already generated, what type of profit margins could we expect, and I'm going to be calculating those profit margins based off of some of the information we got in the April update that CleanSpark did provide in a press release. Outside of that, we're going to take a look at the global hash rate. I'm going to talk about how I use that in order to get a more dynamic idea of what that energy usage could be for mining each of those Bitcoin. So without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, jumping into the numbers. Again, the first thing I want to point out is going to be on the left-hand side of the screen, and that's going to be CleanSpark's publicly traded Bitcoin wallet. Now, I want to talk about that highlighted cell. CleanSpark did move another 900 Bitcoin in and out of this wallet in the month of May, so I will be interested to see exactly what they did with that. Did they decide to add additional Bitcoin to that collateral for the Coinbase line of credit in order to draw down some additional funds? We'll have to wait and see on that end. But another thing I want to talk about is going to be this middle column. So you're going to see I do have each of the dates, and in yellow, the first yellow column is going to be the daily Bitcoin mined. CleanSpark did actually hit a maximum amount on the daily mined so far in the month of May, and that was 22.5832. And in terms of daily Bitcoin revenue, it was also the record for the month, $2,376,516. So again, they have been increasing some of that hash rate in order to be able to get that daily Bitcoin mining up. And we also see, because of the price of Bitcoin, they should expect some healthier profit margins here in the month of May. And if you move over another column to the yellow section, you're going to see the daily global hash rate. I use that in order to calculate the average hash rate for the month so far. And then I do put this into an energy cost calculator to figure out exactly what the monthly average energy cost is for CleanSpark or any other miner really for that specific month. And then looking up at the top portion of that table, just to go through some of these numbers. Again, we talked about the Bitcoin mine on the day, and so far the average amount of Bitcoin mine is 21.967, almost 22 Bitcoin for an average for the month. Looking up a little bit further, you can see so far, month to date, they have mined a total of 417.38 Bitcoin. And a little bit higher than that, you can see that April HODL. That was announced in the press release at 12,101. So looking at all of that, adding up the April HODL and the May monthly mining amount, you're going to get 12,297.58. Now, I do believe they will sell some additional Bitcoin, as they did mention in that previous press release, as well as on that earnings call. But then at that top, based on the current average daily Bitcoin mining amount, CleanSpark is on pace to hit 680.98 Bitcoin for the month of May. Now, with the average price of Bitcoin sitting almost at $101,000 for the month of May, it looks like CleanSpark could come out on top in the month of May at $68,744,000, which I do believe would be a record month in terms of revenue for CleanSpark. Now, for that orange cell there, you can see April margin. It came in around 37%. And I'm making an assumption that 100% of the Bitcoin that they sold was needed in order to cover the energy costs as well as the SG&A for the month of April. So with that assumption, I do have them marked off at a 37% profit margin there in the month of April for CleanSpark. And the month of April had an average revenue or the average Bitcoin price for the month of April for CleanSpark was $86,446. So using that information, we can actually figure out what the total monthly revenue amount was. And then we can subtract what I do believe is the cost to mine the Bitcoin. So let's go through that a little bit. If you take a look under that screenshot that I took from the April press release, I want to go through some of these numbers. So as you can see, I do have CleanSpark coming in April with the Bitcoin break-even price, again, without depreciation at $54,513. Now, let me explain how I came up with that, and I will be using the same logic when I show you the potential cash flows, including the month of May. I do have that on the next slide. So, looking at that energy cost to mine the Bitcoin, I will show how I did put this into the energy calculator, but based off of the global hash rate amount and based off of the efficiency that was disclosed at the end of April, you can get a good idea of what that energy cost per Bitcoin comes out at. Now, here's where I made the assumption. Instead of going in at 6 cents per kilowatt hour, I did put it back down to 5 cents per kilowatt hour because Zach and company did mention that January and February was an extreme case in terms of the power cost to mine the Bitcoin. So I do believe that it has settled back down to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. And I do have a little bit of justification for that. If you look at my April cost to mine, that's going to be using this $38,729 of energy cost to mine the Bitcoin times the 633 Bitcoin. You're going to get that $24,515,000. So taking that and then adding the SG&A lines, the professional fees, the payroll, and the G&A expenses. These are the line items that CleanSpark did disclose in that 10Q. So this is as of March 31st. I have to make that assumption as well. Adding all of that information together, the total month to date, which is the full month of April, came in at $34,507,290. So taking the revenue amount, which would be the 633 times the average cost of Bitcoin from a revenue standpoint for CleanSpark, which again is $86,446, I'm able to get a profit margin of $20,213,112. So here's where I am justifying my reasoning for going down to 5 cents per kilowatt. And it's because if you take that profit margin divided by the overall April revenue, you're going to get 36.94. That is very close to the amount of remaining Bitcoin that CleanSpark did end up hodling divided by the total amount of Bitcoin mined. So if you did that, you would come up with 37%. So again, I do believe that CleanSpark is back down to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. That's just my assumption. And again, I am using the SG&A assumptions from the March 31st disclosure on their 10Q. But let's jump down and look at what the cash flow could be like for CleanSpark and just how many Bitcoin they'd be selling versus hodling so far. All right, taking a look at this slide. First thing I want to show is going to be this global hash rate graph. This is what I'm using in order to be able to calculate that daily global hash amount. And then you can see the level of difficulty. It did drop down near the beginning of May, and then it did increase again just a couple days ago in May. But you can see the moving average is sitting somewhere around 875 or 880 exahash per second. So again, that is one of the sites that I'm using in order to manage some of that global hash rate. They do provide a nice graphic. There's also a Y charts site that you can look at, and they do give you a table with the daily global hash rate amounts. So between those two, you do get that monthly average for global hash. So using that global hash rate average, and then also using 5 cents per kilowatt hour for the cost for their power contracts, and then also using the efficiency at 16.98 joules per terahash, as CleanSpark did put out in the April press release for that Bitcoin mined, we can figure out what that energy cost is to mine the Bitcoin this month in May. And I do have that coming in at $38,729. So you can see that on the table on the far right side. I do have that cell highlighted yellow because I am making a couple assumptions in terms of what that energy cost is. I'm not using the March 31st disclosed energy cost because I do believe it has been reduced since then, as January and February were peak months in terms of cost per kilowatt hour. According to Zach and company, they have reduced that back down. And I did already share just how I came up with the 5 cents and how it does match in terms of profit margins CleanSpark did use in terms of selling Bitcoin versus holding Bitcoin last month. So using that same logic, let's take a look at some of the other revenue and cash flow numbers. So looking at the Bitcoin break-even price at 53,401, that is the energy cost plus the SG&A cost so far month to date. So using all of that together, and if you actually go ahead and expand it by the total number of Bitcoin they've already mined, you're going to see that the month-to-date cost comes out at $22,288,000. And if you look at that profit margin so far month to date, again, I'm taking the total amount of Bitcoin so far mined in the month of May, and I'm multiplying it by that average price of Bitcoin, which is very close to that $101,000. I did have that on the previous slide as well. So if you take that total revenue amount, subtract the cost to mine the Bitcoin so far month to date, you're going to get a month to date profit margin at $19,844,000. Now that actually comes out to 47.10% from a profit margin percent standpoint. That is a very healthy margin amount. So based off this margin amount and them not selling any additional Bitcoin for CapEx or anything else like that, just continuing to save the rest of that, I do have them. If you look down at the bottom yellow, I have month to date monthly Bitcoin to HODL. I have it at 196.58 Bitcoin. So again, that's that profit margin amount of total Bitcoin mined so far for the month of May. Now let's look at cash flows. Looking at the total cash on hand as of the start of the quarter on April 1st, that was at $96,982,000. So adding the Coinbase line of credit of $200 million, you can get an idea of what's the total amount of disposable cash that CleanSpark does have to continue operations, and then also for CleanSpark to be able to purchase miners, infrastructure, or even property with. So taking a look at that, quarter to date costs without depreciation, I am looking at the 633 Bitcoin mined in the month of April, plus the amount that's been mined so far in May, taking those and then multiplying it by that break-even price that cost my Bitcoin at $53,401. So that has a total cost at $56,091,977. So again, taking the overall cash and subtracting that, and then also subtracting the total commitments. Now, they could wait a little bit longer in terms of total commitments, but I just have them going ahead and disposing of all of their commitments so far. And another thing that I do have here is total Bitcoin sold so far in order to cover the cost of operations. We already know exactly what they sold in the month of April, and then I do have estimated amount so far month to date of what they would have sold. So that's going to get added to their cash pile as well with that Coinbase line of credit. So taking all that, subtracting the cost, subtracting the commitments, you're going to get a cash balance without Coinbase at negative 60 million, which they're not going to have. So they're going to be utilizing that Coinbase. We already saw that they did draw from that. They did disclose that in a footnote on the April press release. They actually collateralized on 1,894.4 Bitcoin. And they did that in order to be able to generate some additional cash to be able to do different things with. As they did mention, they did get a pretty sweet deal in terms of purchasing some of these immersion miners at a discount, about 15%. So that actually leaves them, again, utilizing the entire Coinbase line of credit. They would have $139,784,000 still at their disposal. Again, this is after all of these open commitments are paid, after all of the cost to mine the Bitcoin is paid. They have a healthy $139 million to, again, do other purchases, whether it be miners, infrastructure, or property. So I am looking forward to seeing how they end up finishing the month of May. Will we see the average Bitcoin price staying around 101, or will it continue to increase? Maybe we see $102,000 per Bitcoin as the monthly average. That's just going to continue to increase CleanSpark and the other miners' profit margins. So I'll definitely put out another video at the end of the month, really going over all this again as a recap. And then I'm excited to see CleanSpark put out that press release. And we'll compare the two together. And then also, will they provide any additional information? I really hope we'll get some updates on how they're able to do some of those derivatives. As they did mention, they would look to sell some covered call options as they are already planning on selling some of the Bitcoin just to generate some additional revenue. So I'll be excited to see exactly what comes out in that press release. All right, and that about wraps up for me. I hope you enjoyed this quick update on CleanSpark's May mid-month mining numbers. We did take a look at a swag on what that cost would be in terms of the cost per kilowatt hour. I do believe it's went back down to 5 cents per kilowatt. And we took a look to get an idea about what that profit margin was. So if you did like this video, please consider giving it a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on these calculations. How do you think I did here? Love to get feedback from you all. With all that said, hope you all have a great rest of your day. Keep calm. I'm Sean, and I'll see you on the next one.